I'm Emily Sander, and I am also Jeffco staff. I'm with the Community Development Division, and we oversee federal grants that come into the county that we use for housing, construction, and services. Nice to be here. Nice. I can't see anybody on the phone, so to the next Jeffco person.
I'll be happy to go next. My name is Avel Montoya. I'm the Director of Development and Transportation for Jefferson County. I'll hand it off to Tuche.
Hi everyone, this is Tuche Charmauer. I'm with Jefferson County Planning and Zoning, and I'm a long-range planner.
And can we hand it over to David Duncan?
Sure. Thank you, Abel. David Duncan, Vice Chair of the Jefferson County Planning Commission and also Co-Chair of the Continuum Housing Task Force.
Do we have any other Jeffco staff on the line?
My name is Janice Hannon. I live in Mountainside Estates Mobile Home Park.
Okay. Molly, would you like to go next?
Sure. I was hanging back as the consultant. So my name is Molly Fitzpatrick. I am a managing director of Root Policy Research, and we are under contract with Jefferson County working on the 15-year housing strategic plan. So look forward to talking with you all about that in just a little bit.
And I think that's everybody from the county side, unless I'm mistaken. So we'll go ahead and turn it over to League of Women Voters.
Just real quick, Cassie, are you on? Cassie Ratliff?
Yep, I'm here. I'm Cassie with Family Tree. Just moral support for our Jeffco friends here, and any questions on homelessness through this process.
And Cassie is also a co-chair of our Housing Continuum Task Force. So we've got two of our co-chairs here today.
And Christina, do you want to start as our president?
Thank you. My name is Christina Manthi. I'm the Jeffco League president, and I'm also here because I'm doing the Zoom part today.
And Elaine, or Ellen, I'm sorry.
Ellen Steiner, I'm in Genesee.
Mindy?
Mindy Moore, member of the Jeffco League of Women Voters and also on the Housing Continuum Task Force. Thank you. Kathy, do you want to go next?
Sure. Kathy Smith, been a member of the league for about 6 years now. And I also want to say that one of our guests, Cecia, is going to be late. She won't be able to join us until about 1:45. And I think Janice introduced herself, and now we have Michael Pierce, our other guest. Michael, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Michael Pierce. I'm with the Colorado Coalition of Manufactured Homeowners, also on the Continuum Task Force. I'm hoping to provide whatever support and background I can.
Okay. And I think we missed Betty. Sorry, Betty.
That's okay. Betty Sealand, Lakewood resident, long-term interest in League and in housing also. Let's see.
And Lauren, did you want to introduce yourself? Well, this is kind of a follow-up. We've had several meetings with you, and we really appreciate that. We had a general meeting in February with Mr. Kirby and the Jeffco staff, and this time we wanted to really focus in on housing and have a housing specific meeting. We wanted to present some housing priorities that the league established just last year, updated a position that had been on the books for quite a while, and we made it, I think, much more in line with what's going on in housing right now. And so we wanted to present that first. And Kathy, I think, are you going to share your screen or? Okay, and then we'd like to hear from both the Together Jeffco folks with a housing emphasis and then the Housing Continuum Task Force, and then just have a discussion about one specific type of housing that we're kind of concerned about, and that is manufactured home communities. So Kathy, are you ready to begin?
So thank you all for coming. I'd like to give you just a little bit of background about the League of Women Voters. As you probably know, the League of Women Voters is a national organization. It's also coordinated across the United States with state organizations, and in states are local leagues. In Colorado, there are 19 local leagues under the state level, and Jefferson County League of Women Voters is one of those. So we are speaking today as the Jefferson County League of Women Voters, which also coordinates up the line to the state and the national organization. And how it works is that the public policy positions are the foundation for the league action and advocacy at all levels. And it's all coordinated and all in concert. There are, in order to come up with positions for the league, there are processes that involve a study and research program and then adoption of the various positions. Existing positions by other leagues can be concurred upon, but there's basically a process for everything that goes behind all of our public policy positions. So these are some examples of housing related positions at the national level, and they're very broad. These are also used at the state level for the state legislative work. For specifically for housing, it's basically just providing a decent home and suitable living environment. There's also an equality of opportunity aspect for housing and meeting basic human needs. So these are at the core of our policies. And the League of Women Voters of Jefferson County policy positions, we have some more specific positions that have been developed over time. And these are the main list here, just supporting the concept of housing as a basic human need, well-planned, diversified types, and you see that we specifically support manufactured home communities as an important aspect of affordable housing, and also shelters and transitional housing in Jefferson County. I think you were set the more detailed information about our positions with the information that went out with this meeting. So from our positions, the League of Women Voters of Jefferson County has developed some housing priorities that we hope that you will consider in developing things like the comprehensive plan and the unified land use code, and for the long range 15-year planning for the Housing Continuum Task Force. One of the most important priorities we have is the preservation of existing affordable housing. It's very important to do this because it's less expensive than building everything new. And also, if you're eroding things at the existing affordable housing end, then you're basically making less progress as you're trying to build new housing. So from both an economic and a making sense to preserve what we have point of view, we hope that that will be considered. We also would, one of our main priorities in this is incentivizing affordable housing, and then adopting smart growth practices and preventing homelessness. And I'll hit these just with a few more details. For preserving existing affordable housing, there are various strategies that can be used to preserve housing and incentivize preservation. Identifying resources such as Proposition 123, opportunities to purchase, restore, and rehabilitate existing affordable housing or naturally occurring affordable housing, and then taking steps to prevent loss of affordable housing from becoming market rate housing. And one of the big things under preservation are manufactured home communities. We are concerned about the updated land use code that we want to encourage you to retain the mobile home park district, specifically to protect the mobile home parks in unincorporated Jeffco. There are currently 5 or 6 mobile home parks that are zoned as MH district, and these are about 600 households in unincorporated Jeffco. The MH zoning with mobile home park specifically as the single use is the best way to protect these communities from being redeveloped. And if they're redeveloped, you displace, 600 households of residents, and you're especially targeting Jeffco's underserved and racially diverse communities. So we're really hoping that you will consider protective zoning and protective land use for the mobile home parks in unincorporated Jeffco. As far as incentivizing affordable housing, things like streamlining the approval process for affordable housing, which is in accordance with Proposition 123 coming down the pike, reducing minimum lot size, reducing minimum home size requirements, and maximizing home size limitations. Expanding the different kinds of housing types and material, for example, modular housing being allowed in various areas, and also updating regulations to allow for tiny homes. A couple of years ago, the state passed some new legislation for tiny homes that we hope can be adopted in Jefferson County. For smart growth practices, coordinating with municipalities and really looking at a true regional housing strategy in Jefferson County between the county and the cities. Preserving open space by allowing more infill and density in developed areas. Providing incentives for the private sector to create a diversity of housing stock, and modifying approval of new metro districts and plan unit developments to follow strategic growth practices. And there are a few others that we have listed in our detailed priorities that went out with the information for this meeting. And finally, to prevent homelessness, we want to minimize involuntary displacement of low-income individuals and families, and adopting zoning laws and policies that facilitate the development of multifamily residential buildings and preserve affordable housing existing in low-income areas, and then supplying adequate funding and program support to keep people housed. And I will say that after we hear from the Jeffco folks, hopefully it'll be about 1:45 when Cecia will be able to join us, and we can talk more specifically about the manufactured home communities and the protective zoning. So we'll have a special section on that. Cecia is the executive director of 9 to 5 Colorado, so she can give us some insights, as well as we'll be hearing from Michael Pierce and Janice Hannon at that point to tell us a little bit more about the protective zoning. So thank you.
Thank you. My name is Abel Montoya. I'm the Director of Development and Transportation for Jefferson County. And I want to thank the League for inviting Jefferson County and its partners and sub-consultants working on the housing plan. We do have a number of folks that put together some material that we're going to share. So we're going to go out of order a little bit, if that's okay. And we're going to hand it over to Emily Sander, who's going to provide a general overview of the housing component. And then I believe Heather Gotherlis has some follow-up information about Together Jeffco towards the end of the presentation. And then we've also put together a handy matrix that shows the League's priorities with what the county's working on. So we hope to share that last to kind of conclude the discussion. I do want to point out that I do have to jump off the call around 1:50, but I am happy to answer any questions up until then. But the rest of the team can stay on, I believe, until approximately 2:30. So you're in great hands. So I'll hand it over to Emily Sander.
Hi, everybody. Thank you again for having us today. It's great to be here. I'm just going to give a quick little overview for context and then turn it over to Molly Fitzpatrick, who is our consultant on the plan, and can kind of get a little more into the meat of it. But just as an overview, in 2022, the Board of County Commissioners approved funding for the development of a 15-year housing plan. And part of this process was the formation of the Housing Continuum Task Force, which I heard mentioned several times. We have several folks who are either chairs or on the committee. And this is made up of community members and housing experts from across the county. And so during this process, we formed a steering committee made up of the task force members, and our consultant Root Policy Research was selected out of that process. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Molly, who is Managing Director with Root Policy, and she's going to discuss with you the development and the progress that we've made on the 15-year housing plan.
Thanks, Emily, and hi, everyone. Really appreciate the chance to be here and talk with all of you about where we are on the strategic plan process. If it's all right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and walk through a couple of slides. Here we go. You should be able to see a giant blue screen at this point, so hopefully that is popping up for you. If you can't, just let me know. So as Heather mentioned, we've been kind of going through this process for a little bit. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a high-level overview of what all is involved as part of the Housing Strategic Plan. First of all, the objective really is to identify Jeffco's current and future housing gaps, and also develop strategies to address those needs over a 15-year planning period. So we're looking at what are the challenges right now, but also what do those forecasts look like, and how do we anticipate, if at all those needs shifting and changing over the 15-year period, and where might there be mismatches in what the market can help provide, what the county has been able to do historically, and where needs really are. So looking at all of those components. A key component of this, of course, is looking at housing needs. So a data analysis around housing needs, as well as those projections going forward. We're also doing quite a bit of community engagement while not trying to duplicate engagement that's already happening. So obviously Together Jeffco is also doing engagement. There's a lot of municipal level housing plans that has been engaging folks on this issue over the past couple of years as well. So we're kind of pulling all of that together. We're drawing on engagement that's already happening and then supplementing in a really targeted way to gather additional outreach and engagement to help inform both the plan as well as our understanding of the needs. We do want to take an equity focus on this. So as part of the needs assessment, we're doing what's called kind of a racial impact study. What that really does is look at where there are disproportionate needs across racial and ethnic groups, and then also evaluating all of our policy recommendations through the lens of, does this, are these equitable? Are these policies kind of doing what we expect them to do from an equity standpoint as well? And then of course, the housing strategy itself is kind of the final and probably the crux of the project overall. Obviously, Housing Continuum Task Force has already been mentioned and described, but that group is really steering this project, guiding the objectives, helping us prioritize housing needs and resources, and then helping as we go forward to elevate those recommended strategies. I'm going to take a couple moments now just to kind of talk you all through some of the highest level data analysis that's already been done. So where we are kind of in the process right now is we've completed most of the data analysis. We are in progress on the community engagement. Some of it's done, some of it's still ongoing, and we're in strategy development mode. So the most complete piece at this point is the needs assessment. I'm not going to belabor that too much just because we could spend all day talking about housing needs, and you all obviously have already focused on that and have a clear understanding of what those are. But just to give you a couple of market update points, I'm going to talk through that really briefly, and then just kind of let you know how we're thinking about strategy and where we are. So in terms of market trends, this graphic shows the rent distribution, monthly rent in 2010, which is the dark blue, compared to what the rent distribution was in 2022. So you can see in 2010, we had a little bit more spread. We had a lot more units that were priced below $1,000 per month. Now we have this big spike around $2,000. So really steep increases as the rental market has shifted toward higher priced units. That expands what we call cost burden. So folks spending more than we'd like to see on their housing costs. And that's pushing that cost burden experience up to middle and higher income brackets than we have seen in the past. Certainly, though this is not adjusted for inflation, certainly these rent hikes exceed inflation and they're exceeding wage increases as well. Similar trend on the for sale market side. So this graphic is showing the last 20 years of sort of what we call typical home value, or the median home value or home price in those blue lines. You see really steep increases since 2013, 2014. The green, yellow, and red lines are showing affordability at different income levels. And so what we've seen is for a while, kind of affordability was tracking along with home prices, but those sharp declines you see around 2021, 2022 show that those are accounting for interest rates. And so as interest rates go up, affordability goes down. And in a functioning market, we would like to see prices go down along with that sort of interest rate, and prices are not responding to buyers' inability to afford those, is what we're seeing right now. So home prices continue to outpace income gains, and those interest rates are really having a severe impact. So certainly we see shifting affordability over the last few years. It's getting less and less affordable in Jefferson County. That's true broadly in the Front Range, but we're certainly seeing some acute challenges in Jefferson County. Kind of summarizing a lot of the data analysis that we've done, obviously not all of that is shown here, but if you look in kind of the blue bar on this slide, you can see kind of the really high level takeaways from the market analysis is, number one, housing supply is not quite keeping up. So we're not really building at the same pace as we're growing the economy and adding people in Jefferson County. So supply not quite keeping up with demand. We're seeing rapidly rising rents. We're seeing declining affordability in the homeownership market. And in terms of homelessness, we are seeing that in Jefferson County, that's increasing faster in Jeffco than it is in the metro at large. But the optimistic news on homelessness is that it is at a magnitude that is still solvable if, as a community, Jefferson County is willing to try to address that need. So jumping into a little bit more related to kind of how we're thinking about policy and addressing these needs, this 15-year plan is really designed to look at the full continuum of housing. And so when we say kind of that full continuum, we mean housing solutions that are designed to address people experiencing homelessness. So think about shelters, permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, kind of that's at that lowest end, so below 30% AMI being area median income. That's just how we look at incomes from in the housing jargon world. It really is just kind of a scale of these income levels. So looking at that lowest end all the way up through luxury market rate home ownership options. We're trying to understand what are the needs across this full continuum, and where are those needs being met potentially by the market, and where's the market failing to meet those needs. As we think about how those relate to housing policy choices and housing policy decisions, you know, the higher income we get, the easier it is to either rely on the market or leverage that private market in order to help address needs. So if we look at kind of that higher end, making sure that land use and zoning codes are smart growth is tied to a way that it's directly related to demand, and that we're really allowing the market to help address those needs instead of constraining it at that point. As we look at those lower end or lower income needs, we're going to always need some public subsidy, some programs, some dollars that are allocated to that to really address those needs. So we think about the housing continuum, what the needs are along that continuum, and then what policy tools we may have at different points in the continuum to help address those needs across the board. So I know there's a lot on this graphic. I'm not going to walk you through all of it, but it's just to illustrate that as we look at that continuum, we also look at what are the immediate needs along that continuum. Where do we have really core kind of acute needs that we need to catch up or help solve problems that are right now? And then how do those needs grow over time at what different points? And so we quantify those, we take a look at those, and then we try to match up policy tools to help address those needs. Generally speaking, the policy approaches that we have are kind of the tools in the toolbox to help address these needs our number one deregulation. So that's generally looking at land use and zoning reforms that are focused on increasing supply or improving efficiencies. So lots of the smart growth stuff and incentives that you all have in your platform kind of fall in this deregulation category here. There's also regulation. So in some cases, we're trying to free up the market. In some cases, we're trying to say, hey, look, we need to add some regulation so that we can make sure we're delivering the outcomes that we need. That would include things like affordability requirements or revenue generation, so taxes or fees that are dedicated to affordable housing production. Coming out of that regulation, we also think about subsidies. So how can we subsidize to create or preserve that income qualified or capital A affordable housing? So that includes things like low income housing tax credits, community land trusts. Certainly you all have stuff in your platform as well related to incentives and preservation of that existing income qualified housing too. And then finally, programs that would directly support and stabilize households. So looking at eviction prevention, housing counseling, emergency rental assistance, down payment assistance, those types of solutions as well. So this is kind of the framework, obviously, that we think through, that we're talking about, that we're trying to integrate as we move forward with developing that strategic plan. And where we are right now, this is just showing a little bit more of kind of where we are in the process and what additional inputs we're working through right now. So as we are looking to develop the strategies for that 15-year plan, we are still working through some stakeholder feedback. So that includes surveys, focus groups, interviews with folks that are very intimately involved either in delivering housing services or that are in development, folks that are thinking about housing from kind of a professional standpoint as part of their day job. We are also working with some subgroups or some working groups in the Housing Continuum Task Force. There's a homelessness subgroup, zoning and preservation, and then also one that's looking at funding sources. So working through those to really dive deeper into a lot of those strategies. Specifically, we're of course continuing to talk with Jefferson County staff as we navigate through this to see where we can make the most impact through some of the existing programs, what's working well, what's not working well, where do we feel like we can move the needle, those types of conversation as well. And then obviously I want to acknowledge just the priorities that you all have set already, and that those are, we're certainly integrating those as part of this process as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of things as we went through your list, we're like, oh, great, we're already looking at this, that's fantastic. And so anything that we're already looking at, we want to make sure that we're kind of viewing it through the same lens that you all are, that we're using that as input to help guide and prioritize that plan. And then in cases where, you know, there may be something that wasn't quite on our radar, well, we're pulling that in as well. So we're certainly, the timing is great on our end to see your platform and make sure that we're pulling that in kind of across all those categories that you all worked through already. I should say, as I wrap up as well, that obviously our contracts being directly with Jefferson County, there's a lot of very direct impact we can have on policies and programs that are administered through the county, which from a land use and zoning perspective kind of focuses more on unincorporated areas. But we are also looking at what are the strategies where we can bring municipalities together. We're looking at all of the municipal housing strategic plans as well, because almost every municipality has designed either a housing plan or housing needs assessment over the last couple of years. We're working with those folks as well. We're also engaging with the Colorado Gives Foundation, who has a handful of local mayors on their task force as well. So we're really making an effort to kind of integrate all of these efforts so that it's not just, oh, we have an unincorporated plan over here and we have all these different municipal plans that are disjointed. We're really looking at how do we bring that together? How do we kind of coalesce best practices and start to move the needle collectively from a regional standpoint? So with that, I will stop sharing. And that's kind of the wrap up on where we are with the housing strategic plan. I'm going to hand off to Heather, who's going to talk a little bit about Together Jeffco. And then after that, happy to answer questions on the strategic plan or how we're integrating with the Together Jeffco as well, or anything else that you guys might want to talk about. So I will hand off to Heather on Together Jeffco.
Can we do a quick interruption to have Cecia introduce herself? She was able to join us a little earlier.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I'll be on camera in a bit. My name is Cecia. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the Executive State Director for 9 to 5 Colorado. We're a statewide organization focused on grassroots community organizing, community education, and issue-based advocacy. We do that through our works of family and community sustainability and workers' rights. So I'm happy to talk more about who we are and what we do, but you'll hear a little bit more of like why I'm here and what I'm advocating for. So thank you. I'll pass it back to you, Kathy.
Thanks. Yeah, we're going to talk specifically about the manufactured home communities in a little bit after Heather's presentation. So I'll hand it off to Heather. Thank you.
And just to let you know, I have a couple of screens. So if I ever look over this way, I'm not like ignoring you. In case you've seen me look off to the side, I'm just looking at a different screen so I can see something larger. And I just wanted to really briefly touch on Together Jeffco, because really the 15-year housing plan also has such a large part of addressing housing issues in the county that Together Jeffco is working with community development and Molly from Root Policy to address housing issues, but it may play a smaller role as far as addressing housing needs across the spectrum. The housing plan is a really much more detailed plan that looks at housing. But I did want to give you a brief update about Together Jeffco. And I know that we've talked with many of you about the process, but it is a very large process that the county is currently undergoing to update our comprehensive plan, which influences land uses, our transportation and mobility plan, which influences transportation priorities into the future, the community wildfire protection plan that looks at mitigation strategies for wildfire and possible county programs that could be put into place for more education and strategies to mitigate. We are adding a evacuation annex to our comprehensive emergency management plan that will not only deal with evacuations due to wildfire, but also other hazards that could occur in the county, such as floodplains or hazardous waste spills. And then we are also looking at updating our unified land use code. And I know that's where a lot of what Molly was talking about and what the recommendations from the League of Women Voters, how that can really get solidified into regulations that address housing. We are about in the middle of the Together Jeffco process right now, where we are trying to, we have gotten a lot of community input on the visions for the county, priorities and opportunities, and we are just getting into the stage where we're going to be drafting a lot of these plans. Our unified land use code is on a little bit of a different track than all of our plans, but our plans are in the drafting phase, and we're hoping that they're going to go to hearing by the end of this year. And then the unified land use code, we've had a couple of delays with that, but we are wanting to get that back on track and then hopefully have something in sometime next year where we would actually look at all of our zone districts and some of our other regulations regarding housing in the county. But that's going to happen a little bit later than the actual plan policies. So the other thing that I wanted to share was just that these are some of the housing priorities that we looked at as we were, sorry, there we go, as we were writing the request for proposal. And I think a lot of these also align with some of the things that the League of Women Voters has talked about with their priorities and recommendations. So one of the big things that we want with this is to make sure that the comp plan and the 15-year housing plan are consistent with each other. And it's amazing that these two projects are going on at the same time so that we really can work on both of these projects together. We want to create senior housing recommendations, address missing middle housing, and missing middle is kind of that housing range that's in between single family detached and apartments. It seems like the county has quite a bit of, especially single family detached housing. We have a lot of that, but and then on the other end of the spectrum, we have quite a bit of apartments, but in the middle are those things like duplexes and triplexes, quad housing, maybe low rise apartment buildings. Manufactured housing, I think, could potentially fit into that. So I think that this is an area where you have just kind of what's missing in the middle that can increase affordability for people. We also want to create equitable housing options and include attainable housing strategies. align our future land use recommendations in the comp plan with our zoning. So right now, some of our future land use recommendations don't necessarily align with our zone districts. They're not exactly the same densities, not exactly the same housing types. So we want to make sure that those align so that it makes it easier for people to go through some of our processes that require evaluation with our comp plan. And then we also want to review our standard zone districts for potential modifications to maybe expand the range of housing that is available to be completed in Jefferson County. So that's kind of all I wanted to talk about at this point in time. And then we wanted to make sure that we got any comments or questions from this group so that we can move forward with additional direction.
If you don't mind, we can move on. So I've asked Cecia and Michael and Janice to give 2 to 3 minute just overview of the importance of protective zoning for manufactured home communities. So I think I'll just send it to Cecia first to just give an overview of why protective zoning is so important.
Thanks, Kathy. And I will try to limit my time. So if I'm going over, please, pin me on the chat. Thank you, everyone. Like I said, my name is Cecia, and I'm the executive director for 9 to 5 Colorado. I also want to share that I live in a manufactured home community in unincorporated Adams County. I've lived there for over 10 years now. And after my family lost our home in the foreclosure crisis in 2008 and 2009, buying a mobile home was the next option for my mom to be able to afford another home. And 9 to 5 has been leading organizing efforts and advocacy efforts in protections for mobile home parks and mobile home owners since 2015. Our first work was due to our organizing and trying to save bus routes and saving affordable public transit in Denver. We had 2 parks in Southwest Denver that were set to close. And at the time, actually, Denver was intentionally creating zoning plans and code enforcements that prohibited any new formations of new parks and made it really hard for manufactured parks to continue to stay open in the city and county of Denver. We are now, 10 years later, having to ratify, change zoning, and change codes in Denver in order to preserve mobile home parks. So I just want us to think about how, the impacts of something we are creating for a long-term plan for 10 to 15 years can really impact mobile home residents down the road if we are not careful about the zoning plans and the codes that impact mobile home residents. For us, it's very important that local municipalities think about having specific designated mobile home park zoning and protections for the parks that currently exist within their counties and potentially any new creation of new parks or new development that you might want in the future. We have worked on passing at least 5 statewide protection state laws across Colorado, anywhere from creating a park registration system through DOLA, which I'm sure, Kathy or somebody else here could give you more information and connect you with folks at DOLA if you wanted to know more in Jeffco, how many parks you have registered, what do those parks look like. But it's important for us to understand, right, just at the foundation level where we are. You all probably know that manufactured homes are the largest form of unsubsidized housing in Colorado and in the US. That's really important. We are advocating for the most vulnerable communities. We're advocating for an already existing form of affordable housing as we talk about the crisis and the gaps that exist. And so preserving manufactured home parks is really important. The reason why it's super important for municipalities to create, and keep zoning that is specifically for mobile home parks is that at the state level, there are protections when a park is set to close, when a developer wants to come in and redevelop the park to condos, a parking lot, a hospital, whatever they might be, those protections only kick into place if that park has specific mobile home park zoning, which is done at the local level and not at the state level. And this is why we've been advocating anywhere from Larimer County to rural areas in Colorado that every municipality and county should have all of their parks should be designated under a specific protective mobile home park zoning with very clear guidelines to both adhere by the state statutes and create even new protections. We are seeing the sale of parks go at a really rapid rate, and the types of entities that we are seeing buy up these parks are very predatory hedge fund companies that come in and, you know, jack up the rent by twice as much or $200, $100 lot rent increases. As y'all may know, a lot of the communities and residents that live in these parks are folks on fixed income. There are veterans, folks with disabilities, families with children. There are some communities that are just 55 and over only. And so again, we are talking about the most vulnerable folks. There's a lot of reports out there just about manufactured homes and why we should be preserving them, why we should be creating designated protections and zoning for them. Also, if a park were ever to be set in a process of closing or being demolished for whatever reason, the only way that those residents can have protections to both have proper notice about the park closure, have proper time to move their homes, or opt into one of the relocation processes that we've written into statute, they only apply for parks that have designated mobile home park zoning. And so it's very important to do that. If we create zonings and include parks as multi-residential family zoning, for example, that can get very tricky because it's easier to just surpass any protections that already exist for mobile home owners. I will stop there. I am happy to answer any questions and really encourage the county to think about the parks that you currently have, how you're going to protect them, what is your plan to include them in your short-term and longer plans for housing. And as I've said, you know, we've seen cities like Aurora and the city of Denver make decisions that 10, 15 years down the road really negatively impacted residents. I'm happy to share about one of the biggest wins, which was a community called Monte Vista in Southwest Denver. So among one of the last remaining parks in Denver that was just bought and finally will be turned over to a good entity that was bought on behalf of the residents. We had a celebration about 2 weeks ago, and we're very excited that that park's going to be preserved. But it did take some work with the city to ratify some decisions that were made 10 years ago. I'll stop there. I'll pass it back to you, Kathy, and happy to answer questions.
That's great. We have time for questions after Janice and Michael give their little blurbs, and then we can discuss. So was going to turn it over to Janice now. Janice lives in Mountainside Estates, which is in unincorporated Jeffco, just outside of Golden. So she's one of the parks that would be impacted by your decisions at the county level. So I'll turn it over to Janice to make a couple of minutes comments.
Thanks, Kathy. Nice to hear from you again, Cethia. My name is Janice Hannon. I live in Mountainside Estates Mobile Home Park. It's on the corner of Ulysses and Mount Vernon Road, catty-cornered from the Golden Cemetery. We are zoned now mobile home, and we are surrounded. We are not part of City of Golden city rule. We're unincorporated. We are surrounded by businesses, and unless Golden annexes us, where we don't have the protection of being part of the city of Golden. The mobile home zoning is a protective zoning for us. We have about 240 households here. I'd say 85–90% of them are low income, some undocumented people. Another probably 25%, maybe 30% are senior citizens living on fixed income. And I know that for us, I kind of represent a loosely held homeowners group here. For us to be able to have to move if our park gets sold or closed, for us to be happy to move, I can't see where 240 families would go in Jefferson County if we want to stay here. Mostly everybody here is, you know, they go to work and they come home and they feed their kids dinner and they go to bed and get up in the morning and go to work, and it's just people, plain old people who work and pay their bills, property taxes included, by the way. And I just can't see if the zoning, the land use gets changed to where the corporation that owns us out of Michigan can sell, and then homeowners here have got to move or to sell or to accept a buyout. I can't see how that would work for 240 families. Most of the mobile homes here are older. You know, they call them mobile homes, but as far as mobile being mobile, find another park that will take a 1973 mobile home and you'll have a flood of people that will come in there, because most of the mobile homes here in Mountainside Estates are older. I can only think of about 10, maybe 12 that can be moved to another park. The rest of them, they either have to be demolished or accept a buyout, or I can't even think about how that works. So the protective zoning of having just mobile home designation here is critical to all 240 families here, because this is our home. You know, like I said, we go to work and we come home and we feed the kids and we go to bed and get up and do the same thing all over again. So I'm rambling, but that's my take on it.
Great, thanks so much, Janice.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to turn it over to Michael Pierce now. Michael works on manufactured home communities at the statewide level and is also on the Jeffco Housing Continuum Task Force. So, Michael.
Thanks, Kathy. I want to echo largely everything that Janice and Cecia were saying about the need, and also just to emphasize that with affordable housing, there tends to be two focuses. One is on inventory, the other is on preservation, and just want to emphasize how very important preservation is for so many families. Cecia gave the story of losing her home. There's many cases that we run into of long-term residents who have been living in the area, productive citizens, residents of the area, been there for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and then find themselves unable to afford to stay in the communities they've been in for ages and ages. And so we're looking for policies that address that aspect. Affordable housing stock is okay as long as you can stay in the home for the long term. As a home, that's a significant place where you get rooted, where your kids can stay and grow up with other kids and don't have to keep on moving and suffer the trauma of dislocation. So just as an emphasis, I want to put the emphasis on keeping things affordable as they are and preventing any kind of increases that will displace people. Also with zoning, just wanted to focus on a couple of weedy issues, just working on the policy level. We were talking a little bit about the importance for zoning to prevent things like redevelopment of a manufactured home park or to disincentivize redevelopment of the park. And I wanted to just point out extra bits in there, and that's that we need both zoning as a mobile home park, but also a comprehensive plan statement that says that the county and affiliated cities will be dedicated to preserving households. And so, so some broader planning statements where within the zoning statements, it would be basically a park can be rezoned only if it abides by some sort of broader policy priorities. Some of them being to preserve the affordability of the mobile homes. Another one would be to prevent displacement. And so further policy issues leads there might be to prioritize, if there is a redevelopment, prioritize getting housing within the local region for the people who would be displaced at a similar level of housing. So those are some important weedy details in there. I also want to emphasize that zoning can also help not just with disincentivizing redevelopment, but also it can help with the affordability of the homes as they are situated as they are. So there's a strong importance for including in the zoning various things with regard to what manufactured homeowners can do with regard to repairs, what's allowable for fire safety, and so on, which will oftentimes impact the stability of the homeowners in other ways, and also impact their ability just to keep up their homes. Because one of the things we've been finding is that some zoning and building codes that bear on manufactured homes end up putting homeowners into what I would call a repair death cycle, where the requirements of the repairs typically are out of reach of the homeowners. And so being unable to afford their repairs, they end up having to do it either under the radar or they don't do them. And then you end up with the situation where homes rapidly deteriorate. And then instead of the goals of the codes, which is to get structures up to a better soundness, you end up having the reverse result. And so was hoping that zoning could also be focused upon the kinds of requirements that are placed on the homes so that they are targeted so that people can afford the repairs and are able to stay. So those are the quick wrap up of some weedy details that I think where zoning is important and where focus on zoning can help people stay in their homes.
Great, thanks so much. A quick comment about comprehensive plan. The city of Golden has a nice write-up in their comprehensive plan about the importance of manufactured home communities. I don't know whether the Jeffco folks have looked at that, but it's I think it's a good example. And I also wanted to follow up. Mindy Moore put the names of our unincorporated parks at the edge of Arvada. The other one that I know about is along South Golden Road in Pleasant View, and it's in the area where the Globe Park redevelopment is going to be happening. So it's I think that park or those parks, there's a small one too, are in need of protective zoning, desperate need of protective zoning. So are there any questions for our guests, Michael, Janison, and Cecia?
I have a question about the state. Somebody mentioned a state law for the mobile home parks when they're going to be set to close. I think that was Cecia. And there was something that you said that made me wonder if there was a distinction in that law between what is done with cities and counties, or if you might be able to point me in the direction of like where that is in state statutes.
Yeah, I can post both. We passed one, pulling it up now, 1287, which was our first attempt. Well, we did a couple of updates to the opportunity to purchase and then some of these pieces. So I'll post it now, and then I know Mike can speak more to the recent, like, more protections that passed this legislative session. but I'm posting this one now. So yes, Colorado has been looking at other states. For example, Washington State is where we mirrored our park registration program through DOLA. DOLA also has a lot of resources, which I can post here, about what happens when a park is going to close. We fought a park closure in Aurora for a park called Denver Meadows for about 3 to 4 years. And at the time, Colorado didn't have any protections that talked about what happens to residents if a park is set to close. This statute talks about the kinds of pathways, the timeline, the process that a park owner has to follow if they are choosing to close the park. And of course, one of the biggest questions is what happens to those residents and to their homes. You know, the term mobile home is really a misnomer because they're not really movable once they're set in a foundation. They're set to be there. Through Denver Meadows, we learned it can cost anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 as a starting point to just move your home, if it can even be moved. Like Janice talked about, where do you move it to is the other question. Oftentimes parks are not going to take in new homes that the park owner themselves isn't bringing in. So that's a huge challenge. And so there's some process there about whether the park owner would be responsible for paying for the move of the home, which is a set fee, or some sort of compensation that they get for their home, which is really nowhere near the price really for how much people have spent either upgrading or purchasing their home. And so there's a couple pathways, and those are state protections. At the local level, though, that gets really tricky if cities and counties don't have mobile home park zoning, because the law talks about making sure that process is followed for parks that are zoned as mobile home parks, and being very clear about that. And that's why we really encourage local municipalities to make sure that those parks are protected through designated zoning and protections. Ultimately, like, let's say that a park owner was saying, I'm going to shut the park down because a developer wants to come in and they don't want a park here. They want to build condos, or they want to build a parking lot. They would have to go through a zoning change, which happens at the local level. And therefore, if the city or county never approves the zoning change, right, they're in their full right to do that. But that's usually our first flag, is when we start to see zoning change applications. But if your park is registered as a multifamily, zoning, and it's very vague, a developer might not have to do that. They might be saying like, well, we are going to house people. They're just going to be condos instead of mobile homes, but all of those families will still be displaced. I think Mindy just dropped some, Mindy might have dropped something. I'll post the latest statute, but there's a lot of things at the local level, moratoriums, other stronger protections. Like the statewide protections are a basis, but that doesn't prohibit cities and counties from passing even stronger protections if they so wish. And we've gone through the moratorium route before. Really, when we've been in a more like a defensive, a park is closing, we have to go into that immediate fight.
Thanks for that additional information, for putting some of those links in the chat. And you also answered another question I had about, you made a comment about how a lot of older mobile home parks can't be moved. It sounds like just the property owner, the owner of the land in the mobile home parks will only sometimes allow for homes that they bring in to be part of that mobile home park community, or the manufactured home park community. Okay.
Yes,
I was wondering why that was, yeah, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's in order to like move a home, you have to then do all the hookup to the utilities. And we are also starting, the reason why, again, we're saying like preserving zoning and protections is super important, because we are also starting to see more predatory practices when these parks are being bought, where half of the park is owned, like half of the park has homeowners, meaning they own their home, they're renting the lot, and the other half are renters. So landlords are now starting to do this practice called lease to own, So they'll tell a family, you can get on a 5-year lease plan where you're both making a payment towards the home and you're also making your lot payment. So we've seen families who are paying $1,500, $2,000 because they're paying the lot rent, but they're also making payments towards the home. They get to like year 4, all of a sudden in year 5, they start to get a lot of notices from management that they broke this rule, they broke that rule, and they start to harass the tenant up to the point where sometimes they are evicted. And so they've paid off 4 years of the home, they've paid the lot rent for 4 years, and then all of a sudden they're evicted, right? So then they're displaced. Both they lost out on the money that they paid for that home and they don't have anywhere to live. And the latest bill that I just dropped, 1294, this legislative session tries to address and put some protections for that. But what we are starting to see, because we are creating more protections, and both cities, counties, and the state of Colorado is trying to be proactive, landlords are getting, especially these corporate big buyers, are getting creative in how they are carving out people and new ways to exploit residents, which I know sounds very extreme, but is really happening, especially in big parks where you have 400, 600 units.
We have any other questions or comments about the manufactured home communities and protective zoning?
Mindy had a question.
Is Jefferson County considering this Clear Creek I-76 zoning? And I did put a link in there for the, I think it's very old, 1993 or even older, comprehensive plan that they came up with. Let's see. Yeah, 1993. And, is that going to be revised? Will that be protective enough for these mobile home communities that are covered in that area? I know it is jointly between Arvada and the Jeffco Board of Commissioners.
Yeah, that's one of our unique plans. We had, at one point in time, we had 3 plans that are called comprehensive development plans, and they went along with an IGA with adjacent jurisdiction or a jurisdiction within the county, so that we could collaborate more and have the same regulations and plans for that area, plan recommendations for those areas. And since they are different than our comprehensive plan and our regulations, they're almost like their own regulatory document. We are not going to be updating our comprehensive development plans with this Together Jeffco update. They'll remain in place as is. But this is the opportunity for some other areas to possibly be addressed, such as the mountainside estates and some of those other smaller mobile home parks along South Golden Road.
Well, I apologize. I haven't rigorously read this comprehensive plan for the Clear Creek I-76 area. But if the owners of one of those 3 mobile home parks came to you and said they wanted to redevelop, is that going to be an issue? If they wanted to close the mobile home park or redevelop it for something else, is it as protective as needs to be? Because they are in unincorporated Jefferson County. My understanding is they're not actually within the Arvada city limits.
Yeah, that is correct. They are unincorporated Jefferson County. And truthfully, I don't know. We don't get a lot of development proposals in this area. So I'm not as familiar with this plan as I am with some of our other plans. And I know that it does have the area that talks about the mobile home parks. But I would probably have to read the language again to look at what it specifically says, because we've only gotten a few development proposals in that area, and they've been mostly for industrial uses in our industrial areas.
We'd appreciate it if that could be researched a bit more.
Yeah, it would be great if we know that those parks don't fall through the cracks and are protected as possible during this process?
The companies that manufacture these homes, they've got to be pretty big companies. Are they doing anything positive as far as, the development of other mobile home parks or helping the owners? Is there anything positive coming out of this? Nothing positive. So it's everybody is fighting for their own, interests, or it seems rather tragic that there aren't sources available that would provide some direction. They have think tanks for everything, but they're not participating in any of these in a helpful way. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, companies that we have seen come in, such as Harmony Communities, Haven Park, these big parks, and I know maybe perhaps some of y'all have already seen the film screening called A Decent Home. If you haven't, I encourage you to watch that documentary where you'll actually see some of 9to5's work and some of our work in Colorado and other states across the US being highlighted around what is happening to manufactured home communities. And what we really see is these corporate buyers come in and purchase these parks, like I said, do massive rent increases, sometimes intimidate residents into signing new leases or change park rules and regulations that really create burden for these residents and their families, whether that means like some financial burden or just, they do these changes in disguising of like the well-being of the community, but can always be challenged. So no, unfortunately, we don't see them operate in a good faith practice, which is why the opportunity to purchase protections, and I don't know if Michael wants to speak more to this, why we've been fighting so hard to partner up with entities that have purchased parks on behalf of residents. So that is also something we encourage local governments to think about. The city and county of Boulder owns at least one park. Pickens County has purchased a few parks. Some areas in rural Colorado have purchased parks. These local municipalities have done it in the hopes of preserving these communities, in the hopes of keeping these communities intact and affordable, especially when they see or they are alerted that a predatory company has come in and is trying to buy up these parks. And it is very hard to compete. Right now, I can tell you we are, for example, organizing in a park in Federal Heights, which is in Adams County. It's about 400 lots where potentially we are looking at, going up against a bidder that is willing to drop $70 million for a park that size, right? And so to find the financing between entities, local municipalities, is challenging. And I also encourage Jeffco to think about any funds or money that you're receiving, how much of that portion is going towards supporting mobile home residents, whether you're creating a pot of money that they can tap into if their park goes up for sale, through a loan or through a grant. Obviously, yes, we know you as a county, you're not alone going to be able to finance an entire community, but oftentimes what we've seen happen is it's pots of money from different places, the city, the county, private foundations, and then the big nonprofit entity who can actually make the purchase on behalf of residents. But that money has to be able to move quickly and it has to be set aside. So through opportunity to purchase is one way we are fighting this type of predatory buyers coming in and displacement. But I would say and you can see it through some of the DOLA records, out of the more than 150 parks that have been sold since opportunity to purchase passed in 2020, maybe 15 to 20 of those communities have been bought by either a nonprofit, a local government entity, or some sort of model as a co-op or a community land trust model. And so we are, it is a big issue to tackle, which is why we encourage cities and counties to think about, in addition to state protections or state funding, what are they doing? Especially with like ARPA funds or some of these big federal dollars that are coming down right now. We know that oftentimes there's restrictions, but when there isn't, is there a pathway where they are including mobile home owners into those protections?
See, I was understanding Betty's question to be related more to the manufacturer of mobile homes. If the manufacturer has no place to sell a mobile home to because they're not permitted, and her question was more, I thought, to be, are they doing anything to help you encourage mobile home parks to continue to exist or things like that? Because they need to go out of business if they have no place to sell them.
That was really what I meant, because if they want to sell them, are they trying to go out of business and get into the hedge fund business themselves? Anyway, that was the gist of my question.
So, and I have to say, it's my understanding that something happened with how manufactured homes are constructed sometime in the 70s. And so after whenever that occurred, a manufactured home is built in a facility and then placed on the site. And a manufactured home can be placed in any residential zone district as long as it meets the minimum lot size. And we don't have minimum we no longer, we used to have one on manufactured homes that they had to be 24 by 36, but we removed that in some recent regulations. You can place a manufactured home in a residential zone district. It doesn't just have to be in a mobile home park, as long as it's placed on a foundation and it meets all those state requirements for how the building was constructed. So that's one way that these people that manufacture it, thank you, somebody posted that in the chat about those guidelines. But as long as it's constructed per the state regulations, they can be placed in any residential zone district that allows single family detached home in the county. And I should make sure that I say unincorporated portions of the county because I don't deal with the city's regulations.
We know that the housing market, not just in the last 4 years, but previously has at different times has climbed astronomically. People that were born in 1952 versus people that were born in 1957 when they wanted to buy their first home. The people in 1957 saw, when they bought their first home in the early 80s, saw 100% increase in what the price had been. Now then, because the baby boomers are aging, are the economists predicting some kind of collapse in the housing market in 10 years or something because of the number of houses that will suddenly come on the market, or do we even know that kind of projection?
I'll jump in quick. There's certainly not a projected collapse as a result of that. I mean, I do think, there are some folks that are talking about what or trying to evaluate what kind of inventory that might lock up. But the reality is it's not kind of a precipice where everyone will do that at once. And we do have massive generations that are also entering home buying at the same time as some of that is tapering off. So we don't anticipate that being like unlocking of that inventory does not appear to be a solution to our housing inventory problem. It's just that's not exactly the sort of linear path, so that doesn't work as well. We also see that folks generally want to age in place as long as they can. And so there's not necessarily this clear sort of, oh, we're going to have like a generational stop at this point. So, I mean, I think the aging population certainly impacts what type of housing inventory we need and how that inventory moves around between different demographic groups and kind of what, how our stock aligns with what preferences and life phases people are in. But we're not necessarily seeing that as like a big, a coming crisis in terms of demographics. Hopefully that answers your question.
Indy?
Yes, thank you, Jill. Moving off the subject of mobile home or manufactured housing for a minute, I just wanted to make a plug for something that we're pushing with the city of Arvada, but I also wanted to bring to Jefferson County. And that is looking, especially with David and others here from the Housing Continuum Task Force, looking at attracting a modular home factory developer and development in Jefferson County. In the Highway 93 and Highway 72 general area. We don't, and again, modular is different than mobile home. Modular is where housing components are made and then assembled at a site on a foundation, and modular factories like Fading West, they can make anything from multifamily housing, single family, tiny homes, but it creates more affordable and economical housing. And so this is probably something that would be more a consideration for our missing middle and more attainable workforce housing in Jefferson County. But we, a lot of cities around the state have gotten incentives, grants, and loans to create factories that make modular housing and then developments that use that housing. Jefferson County is not, as to my knowledge, has not put anything in like that. I'm nagging our state representatives, like I said, Arvada, the mayor, and a few others, but I really also wanted to bring it up to Jefferson County as a whole. I think it's a great economic opportunity that we're just going to let slip by us, because in that area, we could sell it to Golden, we could sell it to Boulder, we could sell it to Arvada, and many places within Jefferson County if we had a factory that made more affordable housing components. So I just want to throw that out there.
Thank you, Mindy. Any other questions or comments around? And I will add, as a senior, I'm rather disheartened with all the new building that's going on that's 3 stories high. I think even for younger people, I know a friend of mine, her son his wife is pregnant, and they just bought a 3-story place, and she said as they haul that baby and all its paraphernalia up and down all those flights of stairs, I'm sure there's a market that it appeals to, but I really would like to see more diversified building going on right now.
Well, just to thank everyone. This has, I think, been really informative. So thank you. Does anybody else have any other final comments or closing overviews or anything?
Well, I'd like to echo Kathy's thanks and all of the county people for giving up their time to hear what we had to say. We appreciate the work ahead of you. I think that Jefferson County has really needed some sort of a housing plan, because it feels as though the type of housing that's being built is not a good match with the needs that are out there. And so I'm glad to see that there's some work in that.